I mean, inflation is a tapeworm on society, right? It eats away our purchasing power of our money. All of your assets, the economic worth of your asset is effectively going down in real terms with inflation because, you know, your money can't buy as much later. And that's not good for anyone, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Lowdown. We're back again for another episode of Wellington's #1 real estate podcast. I'm back with Adam, my good friend and colleague. We're going to talk real estate. Adam, how are you?
Doing good. Got to ask the question. What the hell happened?
I know.
Those of you who can't see, Craig's sitting here with his arm in a sling.
Yep.
So what's going on?
Crashed on my mountain-bike, unfortunately. So
of course you did.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I broke my scapula into 6 pieces.
Okay.
So fairly serious
Ouch.
injury.
Yeah. Why am I smiling so much?
That's right. Because you're taking pleasure from my...
And so where did you do that? Wellington's got a lot of trails around the place.
Up in Miramar, trail called Topper. And it wasn't pleasant, I have to say, but it'll be a 3-month recovery and then we'll be better back on the horse.
Righto. Okay.
So the biggest problem is 3 months not riding. That's gonna drive me absolutely nuts. It's going to drive my family absolutely nuts. So.
And is there any people out there who are going to take maximum advantage of you only having one arm?
Well, apart from my wife, I suppose.
Very good. All right, awesome. So look, today we're talking about the OCR. Obviously, the OCR has recently dropped. It's been a long time since we've had an OCR going in that direction. Since early 2022, it's gone up a long way since the lows of the sort of post-COVID, almost zeros. It's gone up a long way since early 2022, so it's for over 2 years. It's been rising, 2.5 years or so. This is the first drop. It's just been dropped to 5.25% from 5.5%. And it took a lot of economists and commentators kind of by surprise. Everyone agrees it should have happened, but it wasn't expected to happen. So we're getting a lot of questions, aren't we?
That's right.
We're getting a lot of questions from vendors. We're getting a lot of questions from buyers. And the big question everyone wants to know is, are house prices now going to rise? Are they going to race ahead? Are we going to see a new trend now of upward moving house prices? And you've recently written a great article identifying 7 reasons why you think that will not happen.
Yep.
It's
a great topic, and I think so topical right now. As you said, I'm getting questions almost daily from people say, "Hey, is this the start of the next upturn?"
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that we are sitting right now in a recession, or at least the Reserve Bank is predicting a technical recession for the rest of the year.
Yep.
Every single person I talk to out there is struggling. Almost without fail. Obviously there'll be some exceptions, but you talk to business people, people in retail, people in hospitality.
It's hard out there.
It's hard out there, right?
Really hard. Yep.
And we've got there's so many factors in the economy right now which are against, people getting exuberant about things like house prices. So that is very, very, in a very general sense. But as we know, these real estate cycles are driven largely by credit. Right, and so
credit mean the availability of lending.
And the availability of lending and also the cost of lending, right? So it does make sense for people to think, well, if the cost of money is coming down, then perhaps that's going to fuel house prices, and eventually it will.
And one has to say that if the cost of borrowing comes down, that will support the market.
Correct.
It does.
Yep.
It is a positive. That is a tailwind.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Yep.
For sure, but equally the access to it is equally as important. If people can't get a loan or a loan for a certain amount, then it doesn't matter what the cost of it is, right? So, and we know that banks are still being conservative. They're doing their maths, on whether somebody can borrow on a multiple, that's or on an interest rate that's much higher than the actual interest that they're borrowing on.
Call it the test rates.
Test rates. Yeah. So that plays a role. So is that access to credit, and at the moment we haven't seen banks loosening their grip on what people can borrow, and then just the economy struggling, right? So the economic struggles that are out there are going to take time to come through, and we really needed this to happen. Inflation is a tapeworm on society, right? It eats away our purchasing power of our money. All of your assets, the economic worth of your asset is effectively going down in real terms with inflation, because the money can't buy as much later, and that's not good for anyone, right?
Yeah.
Really bad. So this is kind of tough love. The interest rate rises that you talked about, and we're finally seeing it looking likely that inflation is coming down within the band. But as you pointed out, there's been a lag, and we could, on the ground, people can see that a lot. People can see that a lot more viscerally in front of them than the Reserve Bank can see in the numbers, because there's a lag.
Yes, true.
So
I've heard people saying, I've read commentary that says when interest rates go up, it takes up to 2.5 years for the full effect of that to take place.
That makes perfect sense to me, right? I mean, I don't know, but that makes perfect sense.
And we are now at 2.5 years since the rate started. So one could say we're now just starting to see, we're only just now seeing the full effect of the first increases.
Yeah. The economy, this would be an understatement, but the economy is more like a heavy freight train that you got to put when you put the brakes on, that slows very slowly, and then it starts up very slowly. Not a Formula One car, like this. So so I think what the Reserve Bank has done, both in raising interest rates, they were a little bit late. And again, it's easy in hindsight. It would have been really difficult to know at the time. And so you've got to hats off to them. They're doing the right stuff, and being late, that's just is what it is. And they're possibly a little bit late in cutting them as well.
Yeah.
But the key thing is they had to do it. They had to raise them, and all the pain we're going through now is actually that tough love is important, because we just couldn't have that tapeworm of inflation taking control and getting into that kind of wage spiral, which would have really been a disaster. So this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing.
Yes.
It's bad for a lot of people.
Well, it's a painful thing.
But it's essential.
Yeah, it's a painful thing, but it's now paving the way for the reset that we need, isn't it? For the next cycle of economic growth.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw the real estate, in the real estate asset market, if you like, really start slowing down kind of late-ish 2021, right? That's a long time ago now. That's nearly 3 years ago. So we've seen things slowing down from almost 3 years ago. But my observations, at least, were that in the real economy, by which I mean out there with small businesses and cafes and restaurants and other services and jobs and so on, I mean, we didn't see inflation. We didn't see unemployment rising very much until quite recently. We saw higher wage inflation. People were earning more.
The post-COVID sort of boom in spending was still tapering off at that point, right?
That's right. Real estate prices were coming down.
That's right.
But the real economy was still turning.
But here's an interesting point, and which is relevant to the discussion around the OCR cuts. If you remember the reason for that, it was a credit crunch. Just what we were talking, the opposite of what we're talking about now, about banks loosening, credit. It was the CCFA that came in.
Yes.
The credit, what's it called? Consumer
Credit Contracts Finance Act or something.
Finance Act, right? And so that came in, and the banks all of a sudden were saying, no, we're going to look at every single thing.
That's right.
That you are spending money on, every cappuccino, and we're going to take that into account, right? And that sent the market into a tailspin, because people couldn't access credit anymore, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so it's so interesting.
It strangled even though the demand might have been there, it strangled the ability to fulfill the demand.
Yes, exactly. And so that's the opposite of what we're talking about now, which is we need that loosening to happen, to really see, people will be able to come out of the woodwork and start, getting excited about buying a house for a higher amount of money than they would be right now. The second thing, of course, we talked about the economic struggles and why, if people are worried about their job, if people are, all of these, this period of higher interest rates, and now we're in a recessionary environment, if that means that people don't have confidence to go out and buy, well, they're not going to upgrade the house, or they're not going to do things with that uncertainty going on. And now, of course, we've got high stock levels. So, really interesting thing from my perspective is over the last 3 years, people have put off their decision, right? So we saw, the volumes or the amount of houses sold absolutely plummet from the peak by about 40%. So 40% less houses were being sold in 2022 and 2023 than were in 2021, right? And that is a massive decline in the amount of houses sold. Now, it's not that the amount of people that are thinking about upsizing, downsizing, divorcing, dying. It's not like that.
Life hasn't stopped.
Life hasn't stopped, right?
These major intersections in life and so on that actually drive house sale and purchase decisions, they haven't slowed down, right?
That's still happening, So the reality is people were delaying their decision because they say, well, it's not a good time. Right?
So they put it off, but they can't put it off forever. Right?
And I can't help but wondering, we had a 26% decline in prices. I can't help but wondering if if people had have continued to try and sell, the actual decline in prices could have been worse.
True.
You know, right. So it's interesting. It would have in some ways helped buffer, which I think is one of the reasons why we don't get as big a swings in values as you do in, say, the share market, which is a lot more liquid, right?
Yes.
Whereas in house prices in a liquid market, so it's not like people come out and dump their houses. And
the fact that the vendors pulled back when they saw prices falling so much, that's what actually led the firming of the market in 2023,
yes.
where we saw prices actually recover sort of 6 or 7% in Wellington at least.
Pre-election.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's all supply and demand, right? And so what we got this year, which has been really interesting, and is part of my 7 reasons why I don't think OCR cuts are going to make an immediate difference, is we've seen all of those people come out of the woodwork to say, okay, I can't delay that decision anymore. And stock levels this year are up 50% in Wellington. Yeah. I mean, that is an enormous increase in stock, right? Yep. And that's come with an increase in sales volume of about 20%. Right. Yet prices are going down slightly, right? Yes. So it's a bit paradoxical, but it's because we've got so much more supply. And of course, people coming out of the woodwork to sell are also often buyers. So you can see how when people make that decision, the buyers and sellers come back to market to some degree, and they can kind of match each other without causing a rise in prices, right?
Yes.
And because we've had an excess of supply coming in, more houses coming to the market than buyers, it's actually meant prices this year have continued to drop back.
They've actually come back a bit, haven't they? Yeah. I mean, so it is bizarre, isn't it? If you go out to a random person on the street and said, look, we've got 10 to 20% more sales taking place in the Wellington real estate market now, what do you think's happening with prices? On that information only, most people would probably conclude prices must be rising.
Yeah.
But they're not rising. Well, how come? It's because the increase in the supply levels has been way greater than 10 to 20%.
Yeah, well
so the number that aren't selling has increased by way more than the number that are.
That's right. So it's harder to sell a house, yet more are being sold.
That's right. and as a vendor, of course, you don't care about all the houses. You only care about one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I think, if we take that right now, these OCR cuts are coming into place, and this is relevant mostly to Wellington, but I'm sure it's similar elsewhere in the country. We have high stock levels right now.
Yes.
And so that's another reason why it's going to take a bit of time for that to come out of the market, and for demand has to come up significantly to soak up that supply before we would see any price increases. And that brings me to another point, which is the absence of investors. So
lack of investors in the market.
And this is, you're a property investor, Adam, and you've got, great experience in that area. And I don't know about you, but I'd be really interested in your opinion. But in 24 years I've been selling real estate, I've never seen the investment market so weak. It is incredible how investors have just disappeared out of the market. And I have my theories as to why. Well,
it's incredible, but it's not surprising. The previous government really did crush the business case for investors with their moves in 2021 with the removal of the tax, the ability to claim tax deductions of the mortgage interest, of course. But there's other things as well. Of course, you've got the big increases in interest rates. You've got a real toughening of the environment generally in terms of all the legislation, the Healthy Homes Act, the Residential Tenancies Act changes and all these things. And, and this is my opinion only, I mean, some of those things were really good moves and some of them were actually counterproductive. But, that... What we're talking about is why have investors disappeared, and to me it's easy to see why. The thing is that right now the buying is outstanding if you look just at the prices compared to rents, for example, rents, or the income. What do you call it? The income, the yield, the rental yield you would get on it, right? But the other things are just so, and it's just so unfashionable.
Yeah,
to be a property investor, isn't it? I mean, they're like the plague of the earth, aren't they? Property investors.
No, well, I think that, I don't know how national that feeling is, but certainly you do feel it in Wellington. The next generation coming up don't necessarily see real estate in the same light as what the previous generation did. And you look at the baby boomers. I mean, baby boomers on average are retiring, right? They're coming to their retirement years now.
Yeah.
So they're not thinking about long-term capital growth and how can I get a 7% yield for the next 10 years. They're thinking about, hey, I might need to sell these assets now, got to go to a retirement home, or I want to
spend my money,
sell
I want to cash in my chips,
consolidate up perhaps and have one paid off so it gives me an income to live off. So they're generally, I would say boomers are net sellers, not net buyers of investment property.
Totally.
And when you don't have that same impetus, it was always kind of an interesting point I think is that highlights this is the last boom, of my memory of it, was driven largely by people buying second homes. I mean, in 2000,
the last boom, you mean up to 2008?
Yeah,
right.
Up to 2008. I mean, it was there were so many property investors in the market, right? And they were buying, like investment property was going crazy. Yields had dropped significantly, and that felt like and there were a lot of home buyers active and
of course, as
frothy,
always.
But that was a really large part of that boom. Whereas this time around, first-time buyers were driving it, right? So, first-time buyers, and so that desire to own a house and to live in it and to nest and that kind of right to have a house, which I totally understand, and that kind of almost anger at the boomers for making property prices expensive, and we've got to get in now, and it'll be 10%, it'll be 10% greater next year, so that if we don't get in now, we're going to be paying 10% more. So that drove the whole market up. It makes sense to me. I understand why that was going on, but it wasn't driven by investors.
Yeah, so the data actually doesn't support that kind of sentiment, does it?
Yeah. And so I think thinking about it, obviously there are some implications from all this, right? Like what's going to happen to rents. We need property investors. Obviously they do supply service that is important. We don't want rents to go crazy over the next 10 years because not enough people are investing in, multi-unit, cheaper residential rental housing.
Yep.
So that's going to be.
One has to say that the logic suggests that rents will firm, right? Rents will go up because there's been a relative stranglehold on the new supply.
Yeah.
And the number of people wanting to rent, I don't think is going down.
That's
continuing to rise. The demand, the underlying demand for rental property is going up.
People aren't buying houses; they're renting.
That's right. That's right.
So
we do find that I find though that I think that during the tough times, people take all sorts of measures in their lives that they would otherwise not tolerate. You get people having children or separating or these sorts of things, or coming into the country. And if someone comes into the country as a new immigrant, would they like to get their own place? Yes, they would. Can they afford it? Well, fewer of them can afford it when the labour market is weaker, right? So they will tolerate living in Auntie Agnes's spare room for longer. So that suppresses the demand for a period of time. Similarly, if you separate, then what would ordinarily become two households might not become two households for a period of time when the labour market is weaker, because that person doesn't have the same earning power, they don't have the same income, and so they tolerate living in their mum's basement for a couple of years that they wouldn't otherwise. And so when things recover, all of that demand that has been suppressed and temporarily kind of accommodated elsewhere will come back out of the woodwork. So we see this big upswing in the demand.
So if you look at investors and we say that there's been an absence of them, and that's one of the reasons that, the reason I think it's interesting is because, interest rates coming down with the OCR card. Yeah. Yields are high right now relative to history. Right?
Not relative to interest rates.
No, I get that, but equally, sophisticated investors will know you
normalize.
You marry the property, you date the rate, right?
Yes.
And now we've got some of those fundamentals you talked about before in terms of the government regulations are actually unwinding now, right? Like the reintroduction of being able to claim interest costs for a massive one, huge one, right?
That's the biggest one.
So you would think, rationally, that investors now would be starting to come out of the woodwork and seeing, that there's a huge opportunity right now, and so I find it really fascinating that they're not.
Are you not finding that they are starting to stir? They're hardly back out in the market in full gusto, are they?
No.
But I'm certainly getting more inquiry from investors.
That's definitely more your part of the market than it is mine. The exposure I have to that. I tend to be getting more net sellers than buyers.
Oh, that's true also. That's true also, definitely.
Yeah.
Most of what I've personally been selling this year has been investors selling stuff. But there is more activity happening on the buyer side, I'm finding, from investment buyers as well. Yeah. But like the point before, we've got an increase in demand, or interest at least, early stages of demand from investors, but a bigger increase in the selling activities of investors.
And you'd have to say they're the more sophisticated ones, I would imagine. The
sellers?
the buyers that are coming in now, right? They tend to be earlier, the ones that have been doing it for a long time, perhaps take a counter-cyclical kind of approach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing both, actually. I'm seeing, and it has surprised me that seeing young couples considering investment property make a first purchase, but they're hardly swamping the market. But there is more of that happening now than 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 24 months ago. Yeah, this is what I'm seeing anyway. Yeah.
So another couple of points. New loan to income ratios. Now this is a really hard one to assess.
DTIs.
Your DTIs, right? So debt to income. Yeah. So. What do you think about that? I mean, we know it's in place now, but with interest rates high, presumably it's not going to really have any impact at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll have much impact later?
I personally haven't studied this, but just listening to commentary from other folks in the industry, like mortgage brokers and that sort of thing, and Tony Alexander, of course, he does surveys of the brokers and so on. And what I'm seeing coming through from that is, or the conclusion I'm coming to at least, is that at the moment, the introduction of DTIs, because what is it? It's you can borrow a maximum of 6 times your income if you're a home buyer, and 7 times your income. Income, of course, including rents. Rents being scaled down a bit, but 7 times if you're an investor. Now, on the surface of things, from an investment perspective, 7 times doesn't sound like an awful lot. That sounds like it would limit lending to investors considerably. But what I'm seeing other commentators say is that at the moment, because interest rates are high, the serviceability, the ability for borrowers to service the loans is more of a constraint than the DTI rules. So the serviceability is limiting it to less than 6 times earnings anyway. But of course, if interest rates come from, say, 7% down to 5.5 or whatever, that changes that dynamic a lot. And so you might see the limitation of interest rate serviceability relax way past what the DTI rules would allow the banks to lend to. So as interest rates drop, perhaps what that means is that the level of demand won't increase as much as it would otherwise if the DTIs
and presumably
hadn't been
that's
in place.
The purpose of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That was by design, to stop potentially a runaway situation happening in the future, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see how well it works. So, but that'll be a fascinating thing down the road.
Of course, these things can be changed as well, and that's the other. These tools. They're designed so they can be changed to smooth out the peaks and the troughs. In theory.
That's right. And lastly, immigration, right? So we've seen, it's amazing to have seen the huge amount of immigration coming in, net immigration coming in last year, massive influx into, and of course didn't have any impact on house prices. House prices were still dropping.
That's right.
And now we've got the opposite, which is I think it's about a 50% decline peak to trough to where we are today in terms of the amount of people coming in, the net amount of people arriving. Now, it's one of those things I find interesting because, everyone talks to me about, say, job cuts from the government. They say, hey, must be a terrible time in real estate because the government's cutting.
Yep.
But that's one of those variables that's actually quite small, right? Like it'll be there. Of course, it's going to be impacting some people. But
quite small in terms of the actual...
all these overall
the
variables.
The percentage of people who are losing their jobs because of the government.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so people make it's a bigger deal in their mind. So therefore it tends to affect sentiment, I think, more than the reality of the actual pain that the specific people that they're worried about are feeling in terms of the housing market, right? And so, that immigration effect too may be another one of those variables where, we could see house prices go up even with low immigration, and we could see house prices go down even with high immigration, but it is a variable that's playing a role, but it's just a small role, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm an avid reader of Tony Alexander's commentaries, and one theme that was coming through clearly throughout his commentaries regarding immigration around that sort of post-COVID is that there was a belief that once the immigration restrictions were relaxed, there'd be this flood of people coming into New Zealand because everyone wants to live in this wonderful country and we didn't have much COVID and all that sort of stuff. And it was the anticipation of this flood of immigration coming in that would drive house prices higher that led people to get in ahead of the curve and buy now. And the increase in demand that resulted from that actually pushed the prices up way before the immigration started. So it was the anticipation of immigration movements that drove it more than immigration itself.
It just is a great example of how important sentiment is, right?
Exactly.
Sentiment and supply and demand are actually the biggest. Access to credit, cost of credit, sentiment and the those are the real key drivers, right? Like
Totally.
those variables make more difference than anything else.
I mean, fundamentals do drive in sentiment with a significant lag,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. And also people, and also a kind of overshoot as well, like
Yes.
a lag and an overshoot, where people over value or think things are going to be more extreme than they are, and they make their behaviour.
In the good times, everyone assumes the good times are going to continue. In the bad times, no one can see the good times coming back.
Exactly. Now that's a great segue. So, we because these are all the, restrictive bank lending, economic struggles, high stock levels, investor absence, shift away from property investment, new loan to income ratios, and immigration slowing.
Yep.
Right. This is what we're dealing with now. But
7 reasons why the OCR drop won't
immediately
have runaway house prices.
House prices, right?
Yep.
But of course, we can see things changing for the future. We can see the start of a fundamental shift that will set up the next leg of increases in property prices, right? Now, one of those, of course, is an underbuilding. We're in the cycle, part of the cycle right now, where construction companies are going bust. We've got developers aren't really buying, or developing any new property. Probably a large portion of those guys are going bust as well. Most of them are, you can read in the paper daily about asset sales and things from developers. And so that part of the cycle means, of course, there's going to be a lot less building done. Now, obviously, population growth over time, underbuilding, that in itself will create a supply issue in the future.
Yep.
And
these things are slow to react too. I mean, when things start turning and looking better again for developers,
another lag.
They can't just boom create 100 houses overnight.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so then we've got credit getting cheaper. So this OCR cut, it is a fundamental change, and we are in this. And of course, the market does start looking ahead. You're already seeing, banks starting to make cuts in advance of the OCR cuts that have come through.
They anticipate the future.
Exactly. And then what will happen is that cost of money will get cheaper. Banks will relax their lending criteria. People will start to come out of the woodwork and buy houses again. And it's that slow freight train again, that as it's building up momentum, eventually what happens, of course, is, we need a better economy. Economy starts improving, and then more and more people jump in, and then people start to see other people making money. Right? It's not until you get that.
Then the FOMO really comes back in, right?
Exactly, and this is sort of like this is the reason why we have sort of a roughly 7 to 10 year cycle in the real estate market. So it's fascinating right now to see where we are in that cycle. That we can see in the future those things are changing, and they will change already. You can see it today, and part of that, of course, is the reason that you and I have been big supporters of the fact that it's a great time to buy a house now, because we can see those things changing for the future.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what do you think about the delay, if you like? We talked about earlier about the delay between the rising OCR not flowing fully through to the economy for 2.5 years. I mean, part of the reason for that is that that a lot of us in New Zealand fix our mortgage rates for a period of time, and now the feedback from mortgage brokers shows, and the data from lending shows that basically nobody in New Zealand is now fixing their mortgage rate for more than 12 months. So presumably that will allow the effect of the reduction in interest rates to flow through to the economy faster.
I think that's a good point. I would say that the housing market is only one reason. It's probably even quite a small one, but it is one. I mean, the wealth effect of rising house prices has an impact on the economy, and how much people can spend out there in terms of consumers, which I think is your point, won't change until those things have changed. But there are other reasons, because when you cut the interest rates and the cost of borrowing is cheaper, you stimulate the economy in the sense of investment as well.
Yeah. Business expansion, hiring new people, setting up a new branch of your business.
But that, of course, takes time to get a return on it, and so on and so on. But even the initial expenditure helps. So I think all of those things they build on themselves, don't they? It's not, again, freight train analogy comes in. It's not a Formula One car. It takes a little time to build momentum, and then it does.
Right. So there's still going to be that delay, right? There's going to be that lag.
Yeah. Adam, that was a fascinating chat. Really enjoyed it. And
awesome. Nice work.
Yeah.
Great article. Good discussion.
Appreciate it. So that was the Lowdown. Please subscribe. We're going to have many more of these podcasts, and appreciate it very much.
See you next time.